Hey, welcome to the channel. Back to the channel. This is Machinery Time with Mark. I am Mark, and as you guessed it, we're going to be talking about the big man John Deere today, and a little bit about his family and why he left Grand Detour and came to Moline. A very interesting story. So I hope you enjoy. So we got a beautiful day. Um, Here is the man himself. So funny standing on top of people in graveyards, but there's the man, John. Here is his first wife, whom he had his children with. And this is his second wife, who happens to be the sister of his first wife. So things like that happen. Person he knew he could trust, person he knew he could trust with his children. So John had 9 children. Not all 9 lived. So we'll get into that. So I just kind of wanted to give you a little, yes, there's multiple names on there too. Katie, Deere. I've noticed the graves here by John and his wives are the children that passed away at an early age. The others, surviving children, are not at this site. Well, they're at this site, but they're over different with their families, like the Wymans and the Vealeys, and they're kind of scattered around. So I just wanted to make that pointed out that these are the children that passed away. Got a big, huge cross, and this circle, the turnaround, and people assume that John is buried here, but he's not. You just saw that. A lot of people miss that over there. I think the grand things should be here. So it says Deere. You can see it with the sun. Beautiful cross. Got the trains in the background. But this is are the Deere, the Butterworths. So this is kind of the extended Deere. This is where some of John's children that are buried here, like Catherine Deere Butterworth, Mary Little was Charles' wife. It's hard to make out here in the sun. I apologize for that. Dwight Deere, Wyman, Charles Deere, Wyman, another Wyman. Anna Deere was a daughter. So yeah, I mean, I also found another spot in the cemetery where there's some deers buried that I did not get a chance to go to. And I will do that next time. I apologize, but John's children had, they wanted to be their families together. So it's understandable why they did that. Give you a beautiful view of the new Mississippi Ridge between Bettendorf, Iowa, and Moline, and some of the rest of the cemetery. We'll be back up here again when we talk about the Vealeys and some of the others. But let's go back over here. So as you can tell, the Deers have quite a prominent spot up here. Part of the story I'll tell you is John Deere was mayor in Moline back in the 1870s. And this cemetery was considered to be out in the country. And of course, it didn't worry about, the hillside, because they obviously didn't have lawnmowers back then, and they used goats and sheep. But John felt that Moline was growing and needed a bigger cemetery, and a cemetery that should be laid out to meet that. So part of his being mayor is they bought more land for the cemetery, laid it out. If you've ever seen really old cemeteries, they're just kind of here and there laid out in plots. A lot of train traffic today. John wanted it kind of in a useful use of the land. So yes, they used it very well up here. And we've got a little scarecrow in the corner here today. Somebody has made up. That's cute. Little John Deere guy. So let's get started with John. John was born in 1804 in Rutland, Virginia. His father was lost at sea. He was I don't know if he was a sea captain or worked on a ship or what he did. It doesn't matter, but he was lost at sea, and he was raised by his mother. At age 17, John had already gone to college, done some college, and decided he wanted to be a blacksmith. So he became a blacksmith apprentice. Back then, blacksmiths were very important to a town, especially a small town or even a big town. Blacksmiths fixed everything. They shoed horses, they fixed wagons, they fixed buggies. You needed something made or fixed, you didn't get on Amazon. You got a hold of the blacksmith, and he made it for you. So, and John enjoyed doing those type of things. He enjoyed fixing things and building things. So in 1836, just like others in Virginia, they had a kind of a recession. Things weren't going well in Virginia. So a lot of people, like everything, like the rest of the East Coast, they decided to head west. We were starting to get more states back then. I mean, the whole West was not, we didn't have our states yet. I believe there was 17. I didn't count them on the map, but this is 1837. So it kind of shows you how the West was still untamed. John had a friend named Leonard Andrus. He was a Virginian, lived in the same area. And Leonard had already moved out to Illinois, tried to find his way out west. And obviously Illinois, this Moline kind of area was growing. Lumber, this area was just covered in virgin lumber. The only thing was here was the American Indians, and they were starting to get pushed off. Then the settlers were coming in, so first thing they did was come in and strip the land of the lumber, and a lot of it was sent right down here. Show you a picture. Right here in the Mississippi. So you can imagine, of course, the Mississippi was wasn't quite as high back then. We have the locking dams now. But imagine the Mississippi just covered in logs. I mean, just log jam. And just logs everywhere, as far as you could see across the river. And, all the paper mills and lumber mills that were here in the Moline. So let me get back a little bit to where I was. So Leonard Andrus ended up in an area around Grand Detour. Now, Grand Detour did not have that name then. It was not officially a town. Um, but Leonard planned on incorporating it someday. Grand Detour is on the Rock River, just a little northeast of the Quad Cities. But that's where he started a sawmill. And local area loggers, people would bring in the logs to be cut in his sawmill for boards, for logs for their homes. This is an early picture of what they believe is the sawmill where they started. Leonard started a sawmill. So in 1836, when John was heading west, John basically needed a job, needed a place to go. And I don't know if he got a hold of Leonard before he left or what, but he ended up going to Grand Detour and working for Leonard Andrus in the sawmill. And Leonard knew of his blacksmith abilities. So Leonard set him up as a blacksmith in town. Now, here's where it gets a little tricky. It's always said that that was John Deere's blacksmith shop. I don't know if that's true or not. It may have been eventually, but I'm sure right away it was not. And also remember, this was 1836. So, John and Leonard have got the blacksmith shop going, and the area is getting cleared of trees. And with this cleared of trees, you can start farming. You know, they go around, they would blow up the stumps with dynamite or pull them out with horses. And you would have some beautiful open fields where you could eventually farm. But the problem was, it was a very clay type soil, a very rich soil. Some call it a timber soil around this area. And it was very difficult to plow. Now, another thing that's going to come up here is it's always said that John Deere invented the steel plow. John Deere did not invent the steel plow. It's kind of a fact. I don't know why it still goes around saying that. The steel plow, or cast iron plow, was actually invented in the 1700s. So it had been around. Most anybody who knew about plows knew about the steel plow. Okay? So, nothing new. But that steel plow would gum up in this type of soil. It just would not turn. You just get there and get stuck. So, here comes another item. Everybody assumes that, and I'm not putting down John Deere at all here, folks. I am as John Deere as it gets. I think most people know that. But in 1833, there was another blacksmith in Illinois who is finding the same problem with the steel plow, not turning over the soil. His name was John Lane. Here's the only picture I could find of John Lane. Now, John, different John, obviously. John was a popular name back then. John Lane found that if he took a saw blade from a sawmill. I wanted to show some of you what a sawmill blade was back then. They were a huge blade. Some were round, some were kind of square and long. And he cut it in strips. These his type of saw blades were. He cut them in strips and mount them on the plow. He could turn over the soil. That type of steel would turn the soil over and not get gummed up. So that was technically invented in 1930 or 1833. So, but the thing is, John Lane did not patent it. He just kept making his plows. Whenever he got saw blades, he would make them into, the plow. So he did not mass produce them. Now, John Deere and Leonard Andrus, wanted to mass produce plows. So they started, same thing, using sawmill blades and making them into plows. And that was able to turn over the soil and it didn't get gummed up. So it was a huge success, but technically John Deere did not invent the first self-scouring plow. Self-scouring it's the saw blade, saw blade, but plow blade there that goes into soil. You want it so it shines up. You don't want it to be dull. So with the type of material that they were using, the saw blades, they could have paint on them or whatever, but eventually in the soil, the paint or rust or whatever would come off, and it would be a nice, shiny, slippery steel that the dirt could just flow right over. So, because in 1837, John Deere and Leonard Andrus became partners in their company, and the company was called L. Andrus and Company, not John Deere. So you can look at this several different ways. I'm guessing in 1837, John was a partner in this company. It was not his own company yet, even though 1837 is a critical year for Deere marking their history. Like I said, I am not a professional on this. I'm not an archivist on this. I'm just looking up what I've been able to look up and find in the books that I have, in the history. Some of the history actually my mother did. She did a lot of history in the Quad Cities and a big thing on deer. And that book that she did do was shared with Deere Archives. And best I can tell was didn't really care. It was given back to her pretty quickly. So either they agreed or disagreed or didn't want to know. I don't know. But that was between her and the current and the past archivist. So it's debatable if Deere did start in 1837, but I'm not here to make debates. I have a feeling it was Andrus's blacksmith shop still. I mean, since John had only been there probably less than a year. And Andrus had the money. I don't know how much money John brought with him from Vermont, or had, especially had to send his wife and a child came with at that time. So John was trying to start a family in Grand Detour, get things going there, plus start a business with Leonard. So we'll leave that up to debate. Deere claims it as their company started in 1837, so I'm just going to leave it with that. In 1848, John was feeling a little like maybe he wasn't getting his correct part of the cut of the money. He just wasn't sure Andrus was being fair with him, and I don't know the details behind it, but he wasn't feeling like he was getting a fair cut. So John had his first son, Francis, had just graduated college from Mount Morris College in Illinois, which is around Grand Detour there, Dixon area. And John asked his son when he graduated if he would come into the office, just kind of keep an eye on the books. He told Leonard that Leonard, you might need some help. So I'm going to bring my son in, and he's going to help you. So Francis was brought in, fresh out of college, and Francis worked there for a week. And trying to find Francis's stuff. Okay, I found it now. There's Francis Albert, died January 13th. I hope you can see this. 1848. He was 19 years, 7 months, and 22 days. Now, Francis, when he did die, like I said, he'd worked in the office for a week, mysteriously died. Now, you can look at that either way. Back in those days, there was a lot of, I hate to say this, disease, but you've heard of things spreading around back in those days pretty easily. So they don't really know. Obviously, there was no autopsy done or no chemical things like they can do today, but he did pass away after a week working there. He was buried in Grand Detour originally, and here's just a picture of Grand Detour Cemetery. Once John got settled here in Moline and got his business going and everything, I believe it was in 1877. I have to look back here. He was brought to Moline and was buried right here. Now, also buried here is Alvin, Henry Alvin, I believe. He was 23 months, 26 days. So I'm guessing Alvin would have been brought too. Never mentioned that. So Alvin was probably buried in Grand Detour and brought here. Yes, John had 9 children, but they didn't have the ability and the doctors and the necessary things back in those days to unfortunately keep everyone going. Like I said, a lot of disease and things like that were going around, flus. It was a different time, a real different time. You got to understand that. So not all 9 lived, and I will go on a different one. I'll go through the children, and some stayed with the company, some did not. Some married into people who joined the company. So we'll get into that. So you got to imagine John just lost his son after working in the office with his partner for a week. John was feeling at the time that he was not getting his fair share of the business. It was not his business. Most of it was Andrus's. So I think he'd had some things set up already, but here in Moline, but in 1848, John packed up everything, sold off his share of the business with Leonard, and moved to Moline. Now, how much money he had from sale of the business, how much stuff he was able to bring with in a covered wagon, or multiple wagons, I'm guessing, I don't know. But he was able to set up shop, I'm guessing, fairly quickly here in Moline. So I'm guessing he must have had something kind of planned out. You just don't move to an industrial area like Moline, booming at the time, and just kind of set up your own shop along the river. So I'm guessing he had something maybe already planned. Maybe he hadn't already had a partner. Um, I don't know, but he broke his ways with Andrus, moved to Moline. Now, Andrus kept the business going without John, and actually did quite well. For Andrus, like I said, he did just fine without John. He'd made a lot of money by this time, had an established plow factory. He just no longer had John as part of it. In Grand Detour, he kept producing large amount of plows to the point of Leonard Andrus needed a bigger facility. By this time, the railroad had come to a lot of towns. They weren't already there. So the railroad had come to Dixon, Illinois. It was just a few miles down the road from Grand Detour. Grand Detour at that time was more of a river town. It was called Grand Detour because of the bend in the river. Here's a small little map showing you where Grand Detour is, which Rock River feeds into the Mississippi here in Moline, in the Quad Cities, actually in Rock Island. So the railroad was very, very important. That was the main way of transportation back then. I mean, it went from boats to the railroad. So I don't blame Andrus for moving to Dixon. I'm guessing if John was still with him, they would eventually move to Dixon also. But Andrus built plows there for many years. Here's an old picture postcard of the Grand Detour factory in Dixon. Things like that, just like they were all doing, just like John was doing. They had to diversify. Once you had the plow, you needed a disc and other things like that to keep going, planters. So eventually, Andrus was to the age of retirement, was kind of done with the business, had a good life, prosperous life, made a lot of money. And oddly enough, Andrus sold out to J.I. Case. Here's an early Case brochure showing off the Grand Detour plows. A company in Wisconsin, which most all of us have, I'm sure, have heard of. So I don't know, I didn't look up to see how long, I wasn't doing a thing on Case, how long Case built equipment. Also remember, J.I. Case also, about the same time, purchased Rock Island Plow Company in Rock Island. So they had two major plow companies in their pocket at the time. So they basically, I guess that's how you look at it, kind of started with the same two guys, the same place, basically with the same plow. So that's as far as I'm going to go with the GI Case end of it. We'll get into Case one of these days. So as far as I can tell, John never returned to Grand Detour. Really had no need to. He may have returned when they went to, dig up. Apparently all I could find on the internet was this dreary picture of the Grand Detour cemetery. Remove some of his children from the cemetery. He might have went with, I don't know. But that was probably the only other time I'm guessing he went to Grand Detour. Grand Detour was, I'm sure, was a pleasant place for him at one time, I'm sure. But in the end, it was a very sad place for him. Losing a son that he wanted to bring into the business with him. Having a partner that was kind of doing him wrong as far as John felt. So, I understand why. He had things going on here. There was no reason he didn't have the time to just go back and reminisce. And like I said, the reminiscing was not that great. So I think you can, you can understand why now I did not go with Grand Detour. Um, yes, it's celebrated as, John's blacksmith shop, and Deere's put a lot of money. They bought up a big chunk of the town. They've got the history all there and everything. But um, again, I don't know all the facts. I'm not a historian. Just going by what facts I was able to find, but I don't know if it truly was John's blacksmith shop. Did he truly own it, himself in Grand Detour, or was it Andrus's and they were just partners? Did John invent the first steel plow? No, we all know that. Even the United States government knows that. So, few facts there. The 1837. Don't know on that. That's up in the air also in my book. Um, Not that it really matters. So just a couple things you kind of learn looking back into history. You know what? You shouldn't always take, like they always say in the history books, can't always believe everything you read. You know, the whole thing about Christopher Columbus discovering America. You find out no, he really didn't. He discovered the Bahamas, but he was almost there. So I'm gonna go back over here and sit down. Done enough walking around here. There's the scarecrow again. So we've got Andrus selling his company. John going gangbusters here in Moline. Um, got the cemetery set up. His family's all here. So back to John Deere's company. So John Deere, I'm sure like I said, he had partners here. Had partners here. I know he had partners here because some of the name shares that. But John Deere did incorporate into a company in 1868. Now, a lot of companies, that is when they officially call themselves, a company, like I just said. Um, that's generally their starting date. But we're going, 30 some years earlier than that for Deere, and that's fine. So, a couple things, John, when he passed away, had a beautiful house on the hill, had some of the, and I'll take you there. Not today, but I'll take you there. Was a unique home. Uh, it was his last home. Here's a picture of the last house that John lived in, kind of his mansion. He didn't get to live there very long because he unfortunately passed away. Homes in downtown by his factory. Just basic homes, nothing elaborate. But his last couple of years that he was around, he did build a quite large home. It had, at that days, kind of called air conditioning. So the house sat on way up top of a hill, and there was a big vent at the bottom of the hill that vented air up the hill, cooler air. I don't know if they had ice in it at any point, like river ice. We'll have to go into that once we get more into the house. Maybe that's just a fable. I don't know. Uh, so really, that's about it today. Like I said, I'm going to go more into each child. You said he had 9. Now this back here are some of the great-grandchildren. That row. And obviously this is John and his first wife. She lived to be 60 years, 18 months, and 22 days. She died in 1865. His second wife died in 1888. And John passed away May 17th, 1886. I hope you can read this. I'm sorry about the shadows. It is kind of earlier in the morning. So John, like I said, John ended up his last couple of years with a beautiful home up on the hill looking down at his factories by then. Um, he had been mayor of Moline. He did a lot of philanthropy in the Quad Cities. Well, it wasn't the Quad Cities then, it was Moline. Like I said, laid out the cemetery. You can see it's a very hilly cemetery. And when I leave, I'll show you some more of it. But, you know, when John passed away, he had no idea what would happen to his company, obviously. But luckily, he had a son and many other family members after that who looked after the company, who served it well, even to the point of great grandchildren, husbands running the company. William Hewitt, who I believe changed the company, saved the company at the right time in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. But we'll go into Hewitt also. But like I was saying, John never knew of a John Deere tractor. I'm not sure if John even knew of a tractor. What tractors they might have had back then were obviously steam. But no, John never, nobody really dreamt to be in the tractor business back then. Nobody really knew much about cars back then. So just keep that in mind next time you're at a tractor show in Grand Detour, a town that he didn't care much for, and a product that he never knew existed. But it shows how Deere has grown. John Deere, the company, no longer builds plows. I'm sure he would be surprised by that. But plows don't sell in the United States. They use a lot of them in Europe and other countries, but not in the United States. It's gotten to a no-till or a chisel plowing state in this country, and Canada, I'm guessing also. Plowing served its purpose. It opened the soil, new soil, to a new land, but it did cause major erosion and was probably one of the main causes of the Dust Bowl, where the land just, it got dry. It had nothing to hold it down because it had been plowed, the ground had been turned over. So it had nothing to hold on to it. And we got a very dry couple years, and the soil just blew away. So, a lot of different reasons why the plow was not around anymore. So I guess with that, I hope you enjoyed it. I know it's kind of a walking, talking tour here, and we will get into each child individually. I know we talked about Francis, but we'll try to get a little bit more in depth on him. Unfortunately, there's not a lot, because he did go to college, like I said, in Mount Morris, graduated, got put to work at the factory, and unfortunately passed away. And so his next son, Charles Deere, ended up taking the reins and becoming president of the company, and served the company well, served the country well, also in the military. Don't find too many company presidents who during a war go and be part of the military, but that's what people did back then, and thank God for it. So with that, I'm going to ask you to please like and subscribe. I'd like to get a few more subscribers. I know I haven't had a video out in a couple weeks. Been trying to work on this one quite a bit. Trying to decide what I wanted to say and do and go. So I think this worked out. So yeah, so please like and subscribe, and we will have some more in the future. I'm going to enjoy this beautiful day and a very peaceful spot. And I guess I'm going to say thank you, John Deere, for what you did. Employing me for many years, employing my family for many years. So with that, I'm going to end it here. I'm going to give you a few shots on the way out, kind of show you the cemetery. And I got a couple special guests I'm going to show you also. So what I wanted to show you was this is where my parents are buried. They're buried also at Riverside Cemetery in Moline, where John Deere is, where I've been showing you today. My dad passed away first, and Mom really felt that Dad should, they should both be buried where the same cemetery as John. So that's what they wanted, and that's where Dad and Mom are both laid to rest. As you can see on the tombstone, Dad has his John Deere 4020 front wheel assist on there. He was kind of a pioneer with front wheel assists in this area. He had a 4020 front wheel assist, and he had a 4430 front wheel assist, and a 4440 front wheel assist. So that's kind of the reason why it's got the cab on it. It's kind of showing maybe like all three. And Mom's got a notepad and pen on hers, and that kind of shows the how she was into genealogy and with history and everything. And she did I got a lot of the information from the Deere's family from her bookwork. So thank you, Mom, for that. Much appreciated. For all your time put in. Next up, I got a couple projects in the shop I want to work on, get done before winter. And then Tammy and I got a small little trip planned. Not sure if you know where we're going to go, but we'll take some pictures while we're there and do a little video, try to see how that works out. So hopefully we'll have good weather, and we will talk to you when we get back or sooner. Have a good day, and see you soon. Bye-bye.